Welcome to Collecting with Confidence, Art Investment Essentials, the Wealthspire Advisors video series designed to help art collectors and investors navigate the complexities of art collecting and investment. In this video series, we'll break down key topics like art valuation, estate planning, and market dynamics with expert guests. And now, here's your host, Oliver Pursche.
Welcome to Collecting with Confidence, Art Investment Essentials, the Wealthspire Advisors series, helping investors and collectors navigate this asset class. In this video series, we're going to explore key topics like art valuation, navigating the various ways you can acquire art, estate planning, and investing in general. My name is Oliver Pursche. I'm your host, and I'm joined today in our debut, so to say, video series by Ruth Mannes. Ruth is a longtime friend. She is the former executive director at Mocha Westport, now rebranded to Mocha Connecticut, and also a Wealthspire client. Welcome, Ruth.
Thank you, Oliver. Good to see you.
Good to see you. So, I remember when we first met, you told me a wonderful story about how you and your husband started buying art at a relatively young age and how you've obviously become a meaningful collector. Can you tell us your story a little bit and how you started out and where you kind of navigated to?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much. My husband is Rick, and we met in the 90s, which was sort of a special time in the art market. You sort of had the 80s market crash, and things were picking back up. And we lived in Manhattan, and we lived in a really small 400 square foot apartment. And we were both working stiffs, as we like to say. He was an attorney working for a nice company, and I was in book publishing, trying to raise myself. We were very young. We weren't even married yet. And we wanted a hobby. We wanted something to do on the weekends. And we're both art inclined and art minded. And we just started to go to galleries in Soho. And we're talking, we had no money. We lived in a 400 square foot apartment. And we were about to get married, but it wasn't like we were looking to buy real estate or anything like that. We didn't even own a TV. And we basically said, we want to go and look at these galleries. And we started to form relationships with the dealers. And we started to go to art shows. And it really just became a social thing for us to do. But what we realized is that we could kind of scrounge some money together and actually do this, buy works of art, fine art. And that's what we did. We actually got married in 96. And
So you have an upcoming anniversary. Congratulations.
Thanks. And we basically asked everybody to buy us a painting, a really good artist, solid artist. And we said, please don't get us, Crate and Barrel, gift certificates, don't, and help us to buy this painting. And it's actually this painting here. It's Paul Bloodgood. And he came to our wedding. The artist came to our wedding, and the dealer came to our wedding. And so that is what started it.
So let me ask you, so you just said something very interesting, which I think that if you start out buying art and looking at art, you have to go through somewhat of a process of educating yourself. How did you come to think of this artist as very good and think of it, and I guess from two perspectives, perhaps only one, of, wow, this is beautiful, I want to have it because I enjoy it, which is, well, the art form of art. And then the other side of it is, here's an up-and-coming artist whom I believe is going to grow and flourish, and therefore I can look at this as an investment as well. What was that like?
That's important. And it became more important to my husband and I as we grew our collection. So I should take a few steps back and say that, we've collected a lot of art. Some of it we still own, some of it we've resold to buy more art. And that's our story. Like, that is the interesting part. We didn't come from money. We didn't have huge endowments or inheritance or trusts. And so when I say that we organically really built our collection and our wealth, really our wealth through this collection, that's really true. But you start very slowly, and we were young enough to have a kind of a long runway, because I'm in my 50s now. So yeah, I think the hardest thing for me to hear is that when I hear people, art is something that's so subjective, and they may go on a trip, say to New Mexico, or they go somewhere and they say, Ruth, I I love this artist's paintings, and I always take a deep breath. I always say, okay, who's the work from? And you don't want to always like tell somebody that they're wasting their money if they're buying a painting that they love. It's something that they love. What you do get more careful with when you start to really buy art and you care about it is knowing the provenance, knowing the artist sort of what their trajectory is going to be, what their career is, who's behind them, meaning who's collecting their art, who is the dealer behind showing the art, what their future holds, and maybe what museums are collecting them as well. So when I
Now,
say that
do
my husband
you
and I just putzed around galleries, we were also really doing a lot of research. We
yeah,
were
you're educating yourself. Did you
really.
find in that process, did you find there to be a meaningful difference in the information and knowledge you were able to gather from, say, large galleries versus smaller, more independent galleries or auction houses, right? I mean, the two big ones are obviously Sotheby's and Christie's, but there are many, many, many others. Was there any difference that you would say give guidance to somebody who's listening and watching this that's saying, well, I own 5 or 6 pieces and I'm in my 40s now and I have a little bit of money. I want to do more. And I've always said to clients when we talk about art as an asset class, there are going to be pieces that you're going to buy that you're going to want to own forever because you just love them. And there, while price always matters, it's less important than when you're looking at something as this is part of a collection that I'm probably going to resell because I think it's going to appreciate. And so it's more being treated more like an investment rather than, something that you want to have in perpetuity.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it's really hard. I have to really dig deep into my memory and just tell you honestly that my husband and I did this completely pure of heart. Like, we lived in a 400 square foot apartment, so
You
we
had to get rid of your fridge probably to be able to fit the
we had
art.
no space. It wasn't like I'm going to go and buy a big Rothko, at the time. In fact, when Rick and I sit around and talk, like, our biggest regrets are the things we didn't buy, honestly, that we were offered. And then, those careers of those artists then just took off. So many things that we could have bought. But I would say that there's so many ways to collect art. That's the number one thing that I think people really think you have to start at a very high level, and it's beyond them. So they may as well just go to Home Goods and buy a print of a horse, or
Yeah.
horses are fine. I mean, but it's like, um that you can buy edition work that is sold at Rago, auction house. That's a much less, you could buy a Rauschenberg print, let's say, or you could buy something that's very collectible, something that's decorative, really wonderful. You may not have it forever, but that actually holds like some value. And so there's all different. You could buy very emerging art that you're really taking a gamble with emerging art. And that's what my husband and I did. We had nothing to risk. It was like, oh, we'll buy this Jim Hodges. And then lo and behold, 3 years
It turns into
later, Christie's and Sotheby's are coming to us to ask us to sell it, at auction. So you can have, but it's like anything. It's sort of like, it really is no different than somebody who loves a band and they love this band and they're just going to follow that band all over the country and see all of their North American shows. My husband and I were like that with artists. So we loved an artist named Luc Tuymans, and he's Belgian, and his market was very controlled, even though he was an emerging artist at the time. And meaning that his dealers were not just going to sell paintings to, they wanted to know that you cared and were going to keep it, and grow. They were very protective
Yeah.
of his paintings. But we would fly all over at a drop of a hat. If somebody said, "Oh my God, there's a Luc Tuymans show in Antwerp," we were like on a flight to go, to
Yeah.
try to get a painting out of that
And
show.
back then, you could actually fly at a relatively reasonable cost. There
Yeah,
weren't all the levies and taxes. We just booked a flight, as you know, and I think
yeah.
2/3 of the flight price was all airport fees and taxes
Please.
and all this other stuff. But in any case, so you made some very, very good points here, Ruth, and in terms of doing the research, educating yourself about the artists, trying to learn as much as you can as you embark on this journey. Let's fast forward.
It's also trust. We really were lucky in that we were in New York City. I mean, it was really the epicenter still and still is. So we were able to really go into dealers and say, "What do you think? Like, what do you really think?" And it's not, and we would ask dealers and form relationships with dealers that they had no stake in the game. They weren't trying to sell us anything. They were, a part. They were in our peer group, and they would say, "Oh my gosh, yeah, that artist over there at Gagosian is going to be taking off. You should, if you like it now." So it's a trust game. It's sort of like when you build a relationship with anyone, and if you collect cars, say, and
Yeah,
you go in there a lot and you trust the person, and the person says to you, "This Porsche is going to hold its value."
yeah,
It was a trust game. Like, it was very, we had a lot of time on our hands. We had no children. So at the
yeah,
time, so it was, we were really able to just spend, it was
yeah.
our lives, and we really enjoyed it too. It was really fun to do.
Uh, yeah, and so and you bring up a very good point. I think the importance of education, trust, and understanding of the space, whether you're talking about more traditional art like paintings or sculptures, or collectibles like cars and watches and wines, I always view as a different category in large part because they never last very long in my household. But that's a
Right.
different. But let's fast forward a little bit as we're starting to run out of time. You've also, now that you've left Mocha Westport, are starting your own consultancy. You're clearly an expert in the space. What advice would you give to somebody who's already started collecting but is looking to engage more and do more? What are the critical points for them to think about as they really embark on that journey of becoming a more meaningful collector?
Well, first, I would say the hardest thing for my husband and I, and I would say we started collecting in '94, and around, like, we had an eye, and we started to grow that collection, and had no space for it, by the way. But we had a really hard time selling artwork, and I think if you're collecting anything, um, my husband would always say, "You make your money. If you're really just thinking about making money, that's one category. If you're doing it because you want to love it and you think you're going to have it for and hold it while you watch the career of this artist build, it's like anything. It's like stock in a way, I guess. That's not my world, but um, you know, I think you have to have a little bit of emotional soundness and say, "I'd like to hold this. I could hold it forever if the artist never goes anywhere. That's how much I love this piece of art. I'll hold it. I'll give it to my children. My children will grow up with it, or my family will enjoy it. My friends will see it in my home, and I'll enjoy it every day." That's one mindset, but you also have to be very open to selling. And I think that was very hard for us. We felt like we were betraying the artist. We felt like we were betraying the dealer that and there's ways to go about selling it correctly. If you're always sort of just flipping art and buying it just for market and then flipping it, you're going to get a reputation for that. But if you sort of hold on to things, and really it's in the buying of things that you make your money. If you're really smart and you're sort of thinking about, where this artist could go, it's all a risk. There's nothing promised, but and then the selling of it. And there's a thing in the tax world that my husband and I did, which is when we would sell a work of art, we would do a like-kind exchange. And so we wouldn't be taxed on that, the selling of that. We would but we poured that back into buying a new piece of art. So that's how we grew our collection, because when we did have people come to us and say, "Oh my gosh, this has gone to, this is just
Yeah.
increased in value so much. Would you be willing to sell it now?" And oftentimes it was the dealer coming back to us and saying, "I have a client that is dying to have it and it's worth this much more. Would you be willing now to sell that painting or sell
Yeah.
that sculpture?" And we did, but then we would pour it, then we'd say, "What are we going to
Yeah.
buy next?" And so it
Yeah.
was always in the
And
art realm
yeah,
of,
and we're going to spend some time in a different session talking about the tax implications and tax planning and investment planning around arts, which is a topic all on its own and beyond a single segment. But this
yeah.
has been
And my
terrific.
other thing would just be really start small. You can start with prints. I mean, Rego Fine Art, like go on their website. You can buy amazing, really important artists, and you can buy prints, and you can actually be a print collector if that's what you wish. I mean, my husband and I talk about that all the time. Let's sell everything we have and just be print collectors, or a niche, in the market, and buy heavily into one artist or that kind of thing. So I mean, it's endless.
Yeah, it's endless. Yeah. Well, this has been great, and your passion
Mm.
for art really comes through, and I hope that the audience is enjoying your wisdom, your experience, and knowledge. And congratulations on the next step. I know you'll follow up
Thank
with
you.
us at a later segment, talking a little bit more about your new business ventures. It's just been
Well,
terrific. Thank you, Ruth. It's been a
for
pleasure.
having me, Oliver.
Uh,
So good to see you.
Great to see you as well, and thank you to the audience for watching the Art of Collecting, art-inspired video series that we're starting here, and hopefully you find it informative. Thank you.
Thanks for listening or watching this video of Collecting with Confidence, Art Investment Essentials, presented by Wealthspire Advisors. If you have any feedback or questions, including suggestions for future topics and guests, reach out to us directly or send us an email to clientrelations@wealthspire.com.